Good morning, ranchers. It is a gorgeous day so far. A little bit frosty this morning, but we're starting to get into those spring temps. Kind of getting to the end of our hay feeding here. Hopefully we're about 45 days out from getting back to grazing. See, the cows just got a fresh bale. Spread it out in 2 piles just because the first calf heifer here and her calf, they are the bottom of the totem pole. So if I leave it in 1 pile, number 46 here, who's the herd leader, the boss, she runs them off. Her steer, he'll do the same. He'll chase them off. So I got to split a small bale into 2 piles just to make sure they all get equal chance to eat. Plus, it just gives me an opportunity to cover more areas we want to feed. So kind of tough to see here. You know, it's very thin grass, even some bare soil, maybe some weeds. Certain parts of the pasture that were a little bit thinner during the growing season. So what I've been doing is just working my way through this whole pasture, feeding hay, letting them leave whatever residual they don't get to help cover the soil and make it to where it'll help the growth this upcoming grazing season. So nothing's wasted, that's for sure. Let's check their supplements here. Oh, there's still some in there. I've tried feeding supplements and minerals and stuff in those covered feeders, and they work for the main mineral that I give, but I found that the stuff that I really want them to eat every day, which for me is kelp, the Icelandic sea kelp, some garlic salt, and then I just put a little dried molasses in there to get them to actually eat it. If I put that in the big, I think they call them bowl feeders or whatever, just the big covered mineral feeders, they don't seem to attack it every day like they should. There's a lot of schools of thought on how much salt animals should be getting, but I'm shooting for it should be 5 ounces per head. I don't put that much salt out, but I figure if I get them eating a little bit every single day, that's better than nothing. So I've just been putting all that stuff in these empty protein tub feeders, and it works great. I move these to wherever the hay's at for the day, and they really seem to go after it, just because I also feed, like when I feed those range cubes, those Purina protein cubes, energy cubes, I drop a little bit in individual pans like this, and so I think they just associate whatever ends up in these red pans. I think they associate as kind of like a treat that they're going to eat. So I do have my Purina just general all-purpose mineral in a covered mineral feeder. Let's go fill this and I'll be right back with you. All right, there we go. Some fresh kelp, salt with garlic, and some dried molasses. Yum, yum. Talking again real quick what I mentioned with salt while I'm thinking about it. If anyone wants some good reading material or listening material when it comes to cattle nutrition, I definitely suggest Steve Campbell. The dude's kind of a leader in cattle nutrition and supplements, and kind of a better way of getting your animal's health up there without having to rely on chemicals and medications and stuff like that. But one thing he says is about 7 ounces of salt per head per day if your animals are prone to health issues, pink eye, respiratory issues, reproductive issues, stuff like that. Even internal parasites, external parasites, stuff like that. 7 ounces per head per day is what he suggests you shoot for. And then if you can get them on kind of a maintenance ration after they clean up and get healthier, of about 5 ounces per head per day. That's kind of what he says the goal is. So I have found actually trying to feed just plain salt, even when I mix it with the molasses, they did not intake it as much as they do when I bought this stuff with garlic, which is awesome, because if you're not aware, the garlic salt also can act as a fly repellent and even an external parasite. So, or funny I mentioned that, we're starting to see here on this guy, well, he turned on me, but we're just starting to get to that time of year where I'm seeing a lot of scratching and a lot of itching going on and some bare spots. She has a few decent sized ones. You know, there's some right there. So we're getting to that end of the year, end of the cold season, to where the lice is become, unbearable, or the scratching is finally starting to take its toll on their hair coat. So, if we were in, again, I don't want these animals to suffer. I try not to rely on any sort of major chemical inputs, but I don't want these girls to suffer. And so if we were in January, even early February, I would think about and probably end up just dosing them with a topical delouser, just to help keep them comfortable for the remainder of the cold season. But anyone who watches Greg Judy knows, what he preaches and says all the time is the best cleanup is sunlight and heat, and that's coming. Like I said, this week so far has been 60 degrees. We've got a few days coming up in the 70s. It's still chilly overnight, but I think we're in the clear when it comes to cold winter weather. So also we're about 30 days out from calving. There's mixed reviews, mixed feelings on applying topical chemicals that close to calving or that late in gestation. I think we're late enough in the year that I don't really have to worry about them. They're not going to be scratching and uncomfortable for too much longer, especially with these winter hair coats. It's not going to be too long before the body temperature, especially of the black-hided ones I've got here, is going to be, it's going to be pretty hot. And so we're going to get rid of that lice naturally. But yeah, the salt with garlic, the mineral salt with garlic, is kind of become a hot topic item in the industry. I read about it years and years and years ago. They were like the Canadian Beef Council research, whatever. They were big on it a few years ago, and I was at the point where this was before anyone was actually selling garlic integrated in their salt like Redmond is now, and I think there's one other company out there, but it was at the point I was actually going out and I was just buying Tone's spices. If anyone around America, I know Tone Spices is a big company, but I was just buying Tone's garlic and I was mixing it with the salt or whatever I was putting out for them. I really wasn't being scientific with my amounts, and it was hit and miss. But like I said, just normal salt, I found they weren't ingesting it like they should. And the minute I switched to garlic salt, it took them a few days to get used to it, but now they love that stuff, man. So it's good. I did not, granted, this winter was not as cold and brutal as the winters past, but I used to see scratching and bald spots in January, definitely by February in the years past. And this past grazing season, so 2021's grazing season, was when I really ramped up the salt with garlic, because like I said, Redmond jumped into the game. They started actually selling their mineral salt, their 10 fine mineral salt with garlic, so that it's cheap, costs a little bit to ship, but it's cheap, and they've got it, mixed up properly. So I was feeding that all last grazing season, and I just recently started seeing them scratch, just now starting to see some bald spots. So whether or not that has anything to do with it, I don't know. I'm really excited to see what this year's fly season holds, now that they've been, they're going to be going on about a year of being dosed with this garlic salt. I'm curious to see if that actually is going to do a good job of repelling the flies. Okay, I went off on a tangent there. I actually wanted to make this video to talk about this dude right here, the big red steer. What I need to do actually this morning also is I need to do a pasture walk. Like I said, we're about 30 days out from calving for 2 out of the 3 girls. I need to go walk through some pastures here, this back pasture, and kind of see what it's looking like, because I need to start coming up with a plan for where I'm going to calve at. But I'm not going to really talk about that yet. I'm going to, like I said, take that opportunity as I'm walking to kind of talk to you guys about this dude right here. Big Red, and he officially has a name now. His name is Mack. So All right, let's get walking. If you haven't guessed, or if you don't want to watch the whole video, he's staying. He's staying on the ranch at least for the foreseeable future. So I've been getting a lot of questions, not only from YouTube viewers, but even neighbors and my vet. You know, they look at that guy and they say, man, he's probably ready to be processed. Let's take him to the butcher. He's ready to go. And I've been on the fence about if he's going to stay here or not. You know, I'll give my big reason for it in hopes that some of those smaller farms and ranches out there that are kind of doing what I'm doing, you know, not have your own bull. I'll give you kind of a reason why I think he's actually valuable to keep around. Very long story short is I bought his mom, number 46, our herd leader. She was the first cow that I bought and brought home. And I picked her up down in Missouri. So I bought her from a Dexter producer who at the time was downsizing his herd because he was actually changing farm locations. He was moving his operation out of state. So what was happening was that last year, because he had been making trips, taking things to his new farm, he basically just turned all the cows and bulls out together, was very hands off, and there was no guarantee that she had spent any time with the bull or that she had been successfully bred. When I bought her, I was not aware that she was pregnant. The first thing I did when I brought her home was I took her to the vet, and he palped her and said, nope, she's open. She is not pregnant. So I spent the rest of that year assuming that she was open and not planning to have a calf. The way that I was going to do things was I wanted to get everyone synced up at the same time. I wanted the two heifers that I had just brought home that were about 6-7 months old. I wanted to get them at least 18 to 24 months before I was going to do AI on them. So come towards the end of the year and getting into the next year, she really started to change in how she looked. Obviously, she was at the later stages of her gestation. And again, this was my very first time owning cattle. I really wasn't sure what to expect. And at this point, I had not been doing any sort of research or reading or learning on calving because to me, that was still, we were still a year out. I was still trying to figure out just how to keep these animals alive in general. January, she really starts obviously putting on the weight, and I had people telling me like, dude, she is pregnant. There's no doubt, like she looks pregnant. And yes, I will admit, like there were plenty of days when you would look at her and you would just say she has to be pregnant because nothing could balloon up that much. But then other days she would look smaller and she would look back to normal size for what I thought. And then she starts putting on a bag. Her udder went from small and tight to, like a big old bag. And she starts acting like she's, getting ready to lactate, to the point that I was thinking that possibly she had some sort of infection like mastitis or something going on. So I'm at the firehouse one night, I'm on shift, I'm laying in my bunk, and I download this app that helps you calculate calving date. And I just said, all right, let's put in the very last day, the day that I picked her up in Missouri, which would have been her last opportunity to be exposed to any bull. I put that date in, pressed enter, and the estimated calving date that came up was February 12th. And wouldn't you know it, this was February 11th. Now I'm like, okay, well, this will be interesting because, she very well could be calving tomorrow. I get home that following morning and I walk down to the back pasture, and there she is standing in the corner with this little red bull calf, barely getting his feet underneath him, kind of wandering around. And I just remember it was the craziest thing I've ever, like the last thing I expected to see. So now I'm all over the place. I'm scrambling. I was not prepared at all to have a calf, obviously. I called my uncle, who's been in the cattle game for a long time. He ended up picking up the calf, and we walked her up and carried him up from the back pasture up into the barn. Because here's the real key thing is that night that he was born and the following day were going to be the coldest on record in quite a while for Iowa. They were talking negative 30 degrees with the wind chill. I think the actual temp was going to be like -5, -10, but they were talking 30, 40 mile an hour winds. And then we were going to be getting a huge snowstorm. my uncle suggested, let's get her in the barn. You know, that barn still has some horse stalls. Let's get him in the barn, and we'll keep an eye on him. But even my uncle was saying he's never seen a calf be one so ballsy and unafraid of anything or anyone, and just be so curious. I mean, he would follow you around. He'd come right up to you. He loved attention. So now we have this really good looking bull calf. He's got a great personality, and he's living in the barn. It's crazy that she calved when she did, because like I said, I fully believe that if it had been even 12 hours different, and he would not have survived. Then it kind of started this weird relationship with this little bull calf, because I'd go out and I would check on him every couple hours. You know, like I said, that night and those next couple days, it was extremely cold. I was out checking on him every couple of hours in the stall. I was making sure that mama was staying fed. You know, I was making sure that he was getting up. His ears weren't getting frostbit. He was still, like, he'd, suck on your finger, like he still, to let me know that he was still eating. I don't want to say he became a pet, but he definitely wasn't just, okay, we got another calf on the ground, let's let mama raise him. He was a lot more hands-on, and he was our first calf. So of course, me and my family and my friends, we all wanted to kind of see him and handle him. So that kind of started the thought that maybe he was going to stick around on this ranch probably longer than he should. One reason why he is going to stick around on this ranch and not be sent to the butcher is his personality. He is actually, in my opinion, a really good ambassador for getting people comfortable around livestock. He has become basically the ranch mascot. I mean, he is great when strangers come out that have never touched a cow before, they've never gotten close to a cow before, because he is so friendly, he's so personable, he's gentle, he's very inquisitive, he's funny to watch, he loves attention. I just feel like he does a really good job of kind of breaking down that wall and changing that mindset that, cattle are just dumb, scared prey animals that will end up on your plate because that's all they're good for. So we have kids come out all the time, like I said, coworkers, family, and they love seeing him and giving him the attention. And it has helped some people realize that, hey, maybe owning livestock isn't a scary endeavor, and this is absolutely something I can do for myself or my family. So that's one positive to having him around. But let's talk about the real reason why I think he is a valuable asset to this ranch, and that is artificial insemination. It wasn't until this past year that I really started to see the value of having a steer on our ranch. It was always pretty easy to tell when the cows were in heat just because of their activity, but also because the other animals around them would get excited. You would see the mounting, you would see the riding, you'd see the chin resting, the trailing, stuff like that. So it was always easy to tell when we were getting close to that breeding time. It is all based on your timing. I mean, your success rate on top of nutrition and animal health, I think is fully dependent on when you actually get that insemination done. 100%. It will be a wasted vet trip, a wasted attempt, a wasted straw if you inseminate that animal at the wrong time. And so what happened was, after those two heifers were successfully bred, they obviously were not coming into heat anymore. And so the only way that I knew that number 46 was still open was because we had that steer on the ranch. And he would start giving me those indications that she was coming back into heat, and then I would see her standing for him. She was in standing heat, and I only knew that because the steer was riding her. And I would not have known that I was within that insemination window if it was just those three girls. They had zero interest in her. So the point I'm trying to make here is he actually did serve his purpose on this ranch this year. He was the sole reason why we were able to get all three of the girls pregnant. So for anyone out there who kind of has the same thoughts that I did originally, that a steer is just a horse at that point and all he's doing is taking from you, he's not giving anything back, it's not worthwhile to keep him on your ranch, especially a small micro ranch when you really don't have that much pasture. If you are AIing, having a non-breeding animal, particularly a male, because they're going to pick up on it a lot more, can serve its purpose. And it can be the difference between your cows or your heifers having a calf that year or being open. You could argue that once our herd numbers grow, and I'm always going to have that cycle of 1-year-old calves that will not be bred, that could serve that purpose. So that's it, guys. Trust me, I still struggle with it. You know, that breeding window is such a small sliver in the cattle year that feeding him hay all winter, economically, it really doesn't make sense. But he's sticking around, and I just wanted to kind of share my reasoning for it, because I hope that someone else out there who's maybe doing AI in a very small micro ranch like I'm doing can see the value of possibly keeping a steer for at least a breeding season or two until they build up their herd. So I know he's a big pet at this point. Another calf on the ground because of him. I think that's kind of a fair trade-off. So if you guys have any questions, comments, or sarcastic remarks, which I'm sure there will be some, shoot them at me, let me know, and we'll talk to you guys later.